All right, let's do the same thing, but with cube root functions. So again, the parent function is what we're basing all of this off of. The most basic cube root function you can have is just plain old cube root of x. So we are going to take some values and we're going to plug it into our equation. Feel free to use a calculator for this as you follow along. If you plug in a negative 27, the cube root of negative 27 is negative 3, because negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 is negative 27. So the cube root of negative 27 is negative 3. All right, if you plug in a negative 8, the cube root of negative 8 is negative 2, because negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 is equal to negative 8. So the cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. All right, cube root of negative 1 is negative 1. The cube root of 0 is 0. The cube root of 1 is 1. The cube root of 8 is 2. And the cube root of 27 is 3. Okay, so these are the points that we want to plot on our graph. Our graph doesn't actually go out to 27, so I'm going to start by graphing these points right here. So negative 8, negative 2, put that on my graph. Negative 1, negative 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 8, 2. So what happens, cube root function kind of looks like some kind of slip and slide like you might see in your backyard. It just kind of comes up and curves through that center point and continues going up and onward the other direction. So unlike a square root function that starts at 0 and only includes positive numbers, cube root function goes forever in both directions. It includes negative numbers and positive numbers. All right, so this is our parent function. It's going to be centered right here at 0. So what we're going to look at next is how to move this thing up, down, side to side. So if you take this cube root function, this is going to be very similar to what we saw a while ago. If you put a constant on the inside, so let's just say you want to do cube root of x plus 3, that's actually going to send your entire function to the left 3. And if you wanted to do the cube root of x minus 3, that would send your entire graph to the right 3. The number at the back, just like before, is going to control the up and down movement. If you put a plus 3 at the very end, that's going to move your whole graph up 3, whereas if you put a minus 3 at the very end, that's going to move your entire graph down 3. Okay, those are the primary focuses of this lesson. We also understand that if you were to put a number out in the very front, that might make your graph larger or smaller by stretching or compressing your graph. Or if you were to put a negative up there, it's going to flip the whole thing over. So if you put a negative in there, that'll reflect your graph. So let's take a look at a few examples of this. All right, example, I guess what are we on? Number 4 now. Y equals cube root of x minus 2 plus 1. So x minus 2 is going to send our graph to the right 2, and the plus 1 is going to move up 1. So instead of starting at 0, 0 here, I'm going to go to the right 2 and up 1. Now that is your center point. So from your center, I'm going to go over 1, up 1, because the square root of 1 is 1. And then I'm going to go over 8, up 2, because the cube root of 8 is 2. So over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up 2. Okay. Now remember, the cube root function stretches out in the other direction also. So from that midpoint, I'm going to go over 1, down 1, because the cube root of negative 1 is negative 1. And I'm also going to go over 8, left 8, down 2, because the cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, down 2. So what we get is this little arch right through that. Okay. All right, let's try another one. Example 5 here. So x plus 1 we know is going to move our entire graph to the left 1, and the minus 5 is going to move our entire graph down 5. So instead of starting at 0, 0, we go left 1 and down 5. Okay, so left 1, down 5. That is my new midpoint. So I'm going to start from this point every single time as I follow the cube root pattern. So cube root, I'm going to go over 1, up 1, because the cube root of 1 is 1. And then I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up 2, over 8, up 2, because the cube root of 8 is 2. And then same thing on the left. From that midpoint back to the center here, I'm going to go left 1, down 1, because the cube root of -1 is -1. And then I'm going to go left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, down 2, because the cube root of -8 is -2. So left 8, down 2. So we have that same basic shape, it's just starting at a different location. So you're moving that midpoint around is what you're doing. All right, last example here. Negative cube root of x minus 3 minus 2. So the x minus 3 is going to move the entire graph to the right 3, and the minus 2 is going to move the whole thing down 2. So right, instead of starting at 0, 0, right 3, down 2. So this is our new midpoint. Now keep in mind this last one is flipped over. So instead of going right 1, up 1, I'm going to go right 1, down 1. And instead of going right 8, up 2, I'm going to go right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, down 2. I'm just reversing that pattern. Over 8, down 2. Same thing on the left, I'm reversing the pattern. Instead of going over 1, down 1, I'm going to go over 1, up 1, reversing it because that negative in the front is flipping this thing over. And then over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up 2, reversing that pattern. So you get that same shape, it's just flipped over the opposite direction. And that is how we graph cube root functions.